Alright guys, so today we're going to be working on the Civic, and I'm going to be swapping the Y7 intake manifold over to the Y8 intake manifold. So here's my Y8 intake manifold. This one is actually the Y8 automatic intake manifold, and I didn't know I needed the manual until after. But I think I can still make it work. I was getting both answers, yes and no, on forums and stuff, but I think all I had to do was it had these like airport holes in them, and I got them welded up, so those shouldn't be a problem anymore. And then I think that's the HVAC sensor on the manuals. That's there, so that's going to be a hole that you have to plug up, like put a plate over or something. But actually on the automatic it worked out better because you don't have to plug it up, it's already plugged up. First thing I did was I actually depressurized the fuel rail, the fuel system. I took the fuse out, which the fuse panel is up under your dash, like up under your steering column, and it's fuse 13. It's like second row down and 2 over or something like that. It's a 15 amp fuse. I just took that out, turned the car over to depressurize the fuel. It wouldn't start obviously, and then put the fuse back in just so I didn't lose it. But that's all you need to do there. So I'm just going to give you a brief rundown of what I'm going to be doing. I'm going to be using the Y7 throttle body. I'm going to take this off, get that out of the way. I'm going to go ahead and take the fuel rail off, take the throttle body off. I went ahead and labeled my injectors 1, 2, 3, 4, just so I know where to connect those back. One thing that might be a good idea is to take a picture or video of how it is right now, just so you know like what all the connections are for, where they go back to, or you could just label them with tape. So I went ahead and just removed the throttle cable, and that reminds me, I'm gonna have to use the Y8 throttle cable, which I got one, and I also think I need to use the Y8 spring rotor on the throttle body, which I don't have. So I might try to see if I can make this work, but eventually I'll probably end up getting the right one. For the fuel rail, I went ahead and took 2 10mm bolts out that hold the fuel rail down to the manifold, and then I took this hose off and I unplugged all of the injector wires. I'm going to cut these off, let the injector wires just sit there, and then I'm going to take the fuel rail off and just set it off to the side. Now I'm going to remove this bracket here, and I'm going to take the throttle body off. So I just disconnected all the connections off of the throttle body and off the injectors. I just removed this bracket. It was bolted right here. I just took that off, set it to the side. It had a hose going to it. Took that off. Now I'm going to go ahead and unbolt the throttle body, take it off, and then unbolt the manifold. Now I'm going to go ahead and remove the 2, 4, 5 bolts on the intake manifold, and hope that comes right off. I forgot there's a big coolant line on the side over here that I'm going to take off. That's the one I think I might have to drain the antifreeze. I don't want to. I don't know. I'm just gonna take it off, see what happens. And then there's also some hoses down here in the middle I gotta take off too. Alright, so I did have to drain the coolant, unfortunately, but it's not bad. There's just like a little wing nut on the bottom of the radiator I just drained into a small bowl, because it was coming out right here. Now everything's loose. Hoses are all off, I think. So whether or not I can get it off or not, we'll see. Down underneath of it over here, there's a bracket. And from what I can feel, there's one bolt holding it. That was it. Now I'm gonna have to remove this gasket. But there was a bolt in here that's underneath the manifold that you gotta take out. It's a 12 millimeter right here. It was kind of a pain, but other than that, everything's been real easy. So I was getting ready to throw on the new manifold. I just got the gasket cleaned all off there. And I was going to throw the new manifold on, and I saw these hoses down here that I disconnected earlier, but there's a hose that goes here and a hose that goes here that comes up through the hole, this hole, and comes up to one of these two, I think, and then your throttle body. So looking at it, I decided that I'm going to go ahead and extend those now, because that would be a pain to run a hose down through there with the manifold on. So I just ran uptown and I got more of that hose. I got 5 feet of that hose. And also I'm going to show you how I am determining these hoses down here, how to cut them to length. These hoses, this one, and then there's going to be another one on this black box. Alright, so what I did was I put the hose, this hose, in there, and it was longer obviously. And I ran it up through this hole, and I knew that that is supposed to be going, make sure it isn't kinked or anything. That's supposed to be going here. So I just cut it to length. Now, right now I'm figuring out where the other one goes on that rail down there. It actually goes to the throttle body. There's a throttle body. So it's gonna come down here underneath the throttle body. So just run your other one. I'm not gonna run mine through this hole, I'm gonna run it underneath of it, but just run it and make sure it's long enough to fit under there. When you're putting your fuel rail back on, don't forget about these little rubber seals. Most of mine, I have to find the 4th one, but most of mine stayed in. That one's gone, it's over there somewhere. But don't forget to take those out and put them in your Y8 manifold. On the fuel rail, there was a bracket that held a hose on the bottom of it, and that bracket also went down and bolted to the old manifold. On this manifold, there's no spot for it, so I just took a Dremel, cut it off right there, and it doesn't hit anymore, so that worked out good. Okay guys, so this thing right here, this top piece is just running into there. Then it ran down to the bottom of this. This is for coolant, and this actually ran up to the old throttle body. So now the throttle body is going to be over here, so I'm just going to get rid of this altogether. I'm just not going to use this. I'm going to leave this open as a breather. I might get like a filter or something just to make it look better. But I'm going to leave that open. I'm going to take a hose, come from here and around, and come to this valve here. And then that's also going to leave this coolant port open here. And I'm going to take this and just go, I'm going to take this and go directly up into the throttle body with another hose. You want to get a Y8. Yeah, you want to get a Y8, I think it's a Y8 gasket, throttle body gasket. And it has to have these notches in it. It has to have these notches. They make one, it might be, I don't know, the Y8 or Y7. The other one is just round, it doesn't have these. If it doesn't have those, it's gonna idle weird. It's gonna idle at like $2,000. So make sure you get these with the notches in them. There's a part number, I guess, right there. So yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and throw that on. So it's the second day for the intake manifold swap. And that is because I was having some problems starting the car. But let's go ahead and do a little overview of everything. So here's the swap. I do have some zip ties holding the throttle cable on there because I need to change to the Y8 throttle rotor still. I just got this rigged up, but you're going to want the Y8 throttle cable with the Y8 throttle rotor. We'll start here. Well, here. This goes to your brake booster. This down here goes to your fuel rail, your fuel. The top port here goes down to the little black box underneath your intake manifold. The bottom one here comes around and comes around to this valve right here. Right here, this goes to the front port on the bottom of your throttle body. Then you've got a water tube underneath your intake manifold that has a hose coming to the back of the throttle body, back there behind the front port. And you also have these connections up here. The colors on this go yellow, green, red. The colors on this go green, red, yellow. And I did have to cut the wire insulation down here to make this, I think it was this one, reach around and fit. So this comes here. Now on the automatic intake manifold, there's another port on the back, a small port like the same size as this. You're not going to use that. I just do like a vacuum cap and zip tied it on there, and it works good. All right, so let's talk about the reason it was not starting. So I had this going to the like water hose, and then I had the black box hooked into a coolant return line in the throttle body. And when I started it, that pumped coolant into the intake, which is obviously not good. It's going to cause some problems. Once I flipped them two hoses, it still wasn't turning over. It wanted to start, but it just wasn't. And I cranked a bunch, trying to get it to start and start up, just hoping it would start and pump whatever was in there out. So I was out of time yesterday, so I let it sit, come home from work today, and went to go start it, and it was struggling. So if it does that, just let your car idle. And the reason I knew it was coolant is because my exhaust was just, white smoke was flowing out. But I was like, okay, I got a bunch of coolant in there. So I just let it run for a good while and let all that coolant get out of there, and it runs and idles perfect now. I didn't have to make any adjustments on it. I know I've seen where some people do, but I didn't. Some things to remember: if it's not starting, make sure you put your fuel pump fuse back in. Let's see. So I think that's about everything. Quick recap on the manual intake manifold and the automatic intake manifold. The only difference is, like, I think the 99 and up, it has air injection holes that they added. You're gonna wanna plug those up. I've heard people use JB Weld. I had access to a welder, so I just had them welded up, and I smoothed it out so the sealing surface was smooth. And then it's got that port on the flange on top, which you can weld that up, which I had welded up like on the sealing surface, but I threw a vacuum cap on there just for extra sealant, just for my personal security. And then it has that one extra port on the backside I was just telling you about, that real little one that you don't use. I think I heard that that's for like cruise control or something. And then if you have the manual, it's gonna have the I think it's the HVAC sensor. I think it has that mounted on the back side of the intake manifold. The automatic does not. It's covered. So if you have the manual, you want to make sure you take that sensor off and use a plate or weld or something to cover that hole and make sure it's sealed so you don't get any big vacuum leaks or anything. And the reason you can't use that is because the plugs are different. It's like one's a 2-prong, and that, or the manual one on the intake manifold is like a 2-prong, I think, and that one's a 3-prong. Anyway, that is how you swap the Y7 intake manifold to the Y8 intake manifold. And the only reason I did it is because I plan on boosting the car, and I didn't want to have a 90-degree bend going down into my throttle body. So plus it looks better. But anyway, that's the rundown on the swap. Let me know if you have any questions. Thanks for watching.